Hello. So this will be one of the first of many videos I plan to make at some point just to give a brief summary and kind of a show and tell of what I'm learning on my own time. So over the summer, one of the subject matters I really wanted to dip my toes in was creating trees. Such a tricky thing. You think drawing trees would be simple, but you look at them in real life and you're like, how am I supposed to copy that? And fortunately, we have the power of YouTube and all the wonderful artists out there who show you in like 10 minutes or less how to draw a tree. Uh, so I'm going to show you what I came to discover over the summer. I watched a few videos and I tried to analyze what were some of the overlapping um, fundamentals, and then I tried to piece together something into a process that worked for me. So I'm going to show you how I draw my trees, and I'll try to explain um, like my mindset going into it and why I do it and all that other stuff. So let's just go ahead and start. So with a tree, we're going to start with our trunk, which is just a simple cylinder. So I'm going to draw my lines for that real quick, keeping it simple. Not too worried for like super accuracy. And for right now, I do recognize there's a little bit of a glare on my page uh, because of the light that's coming off my camera. I'm going to go over my line work with a much darker pencil. In a previous run of trying to record this, I did see going over it with a darker pencil helped out a lot. So just bear with me. So now that we have this cylinder down for our trunk, I'm going to draw an ellipse here because this will be the boundaries we're going to set for our roots. So if you've ever looked at a tree, it's not just a straight cylinder down all the time. You do have some trees that have giant trunks, and they kind of have almost like making an archer's arrow where you have like the shaft and then you have where like the fletching comes out. So this will be where our roots will come out from the trunk and they will go into the ground. So we'll have it like a so. So the next thing that I draw in the process is the canopy. Uh, Going back to what I said, man, drawing trees are tricky because if you ever looked at one and then figured out and thought to yourself, how am I going to draw that? Because a canopy is just so complex and it has so many different layers. Uh, One thing I've been trying to practice more effectively is to look at something as complicated as a tree and try and pick out the simple shapes to break it down and make it less scary to approach. So for most canopies, you're going to be looking at your circular shapes. Some are more like cone shaped, but for the simple ones like an oak tree, we're gonna go with a hemisphere. I'm not looking for exact perfection because if you ever looked at a tree, it's not a perfect hemisphere up at the top. So we have the semicircle, and we're going to add this little arc here to give it a little bit of form. That is to say, give it that 3D-ness. Remember, shape just applies to 2D, how it looks, and form is the 3D. It's like a similar definition, it just applies to 3D instead of 2D. So one other video that I looked at, what it'll do is when you're looking to approach those layers of the canopy, we will we'll start adding these ellipses. And these ellipses will be our guidelines for whenever we're actually adding some of those details and the construction of our canopy. I try and treat these ellipses kind of like bowling pins, where each progressive level has fewer. Not always, because each tree is different. But I would encourage you to play with the sizes of each, and who knows? And it's okay if you overlap a little bit, because every tree is different. And it's okay to draw your ellipses outside of the line that you made for your hemisphere. And you'll see why later. It'll make it more unique. And just like with this large hemisphere, we're going to add those arcs into these ellipses to give a little bit of form, and later on they will act as guidelines whenever we start putting in those details into our canopy. You don't have to use them all, which you'll see later. So the next thing I like to do is from here, just like we did down here with our roots, we can then go ahead and add our branches that will go into our canopy. I do try and make this curve look organic. So we'll put that in here. And just remember the thickness does decrease the closer you get to the top. And just to make it feel a little bit more naturalistic, we're going to have it break off here. I'm not looking for symmetry within these branches because, every tree is asymmetrical. And, you know, you can also make it not only asymmetrical with the amount of branches or how the branches look like that, where I have two kind of branch offs here. You can also just make it asymmetrical in height too. So I'm just going to have one branch off here and then two on the right side, which is fine. Kind of like that. Um, so the next thing you want to do is, and I'll extend my trunk here just because I think this time around I'm gonna want us to have kind of like that camera view where we're looking underneath the tree as opposed to if we were looking at it eye level where we may not be able to see it. So the next thing is to add a little bit of the details for like the leaves and the kind of that rough leafy outline. So for right now, my stuff looks a little spiky. Um, I'm still figuring out other ways to make my canopy reflect the different types of leaf we have because you have kind of like your broad leaves, which is what I'm drawing now, but then you also have like your rounder leaves. And just in the moment, if you're doing like a quick sketch and a quick doodle, you know um, I don't know quite yet how I can do more rounded edges of my leaves, but that'll be something I'm going to tackle at a later date. And also, if you've noticed, I do not always draw on the line, the construction lines that I've made. I do what's called carving in or carving out, where I will either carve on the line or carve within it, as in like carving in, or I'll go outside the line, which is what I call carving out. Um, or yeah, and it works out that way. And to me, having the construction lines, the purpose of having them are to guide you like 80-90% of the way as you're making your subject matter, and then how you choose to carve in and out your topic or your subject is up to you. That's where that 10-20% uh, is left up to you to make those creative decisions. So now that I have this outline, the basic form of my canopy, these construction lines that I have here with my ellipses, uh, these will be my guidelines to create those layers of the canopy I was talking about earlier that can be a little tricky. You don't have to follow them to a T, which you'll see as I'm kind of going through. But the cool thing is you can use these overlapping lines to create a bit of harmony. Uh, they're interconnected lines, is what I wanted to say. Uh, because a tree is not always so uniform, it gives you the freedom to design your canopy as you see fit. And I do tend to draw more along the lines here when I'm doing these interior lines, just because it just tends to work out that way, visually speaking. Um, And not always. I don't, sometimes I'll just kind of include a broken line here. I won't make it connected just because I want to add a little bit more depth and 3D-ness to my canopy. Let's see, where else can I go with that? We could probably add a little bit more here. Nah, that's too much. I think I'll leave it as is. That's okay. Because we have at least three layers, three tiers. So we have like our first one here, this kind of solid one here, and it bleeds a little bit into the top here, and then we have our top layer. So I think that'll work. I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup. I don't mind doing a little bit of cleanup as I go. And I will darken these lines in just a minute. So, um, so right before I go into my shading, I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup first. And then I'm going to darken my line work so that way y'all can see more clearly what it is I have done. So before I've been using an F pencil. I like using my HB as kind of like a mid-tone. Um, and then if I really need to go dark, I have a 4B. There's plenty other pencils you can use, ranging light and dark, but just for like simplicity, when I'm just doodling in my sketch pad, I just keep it to my F to start out with, my HB whenever I want to go kind of darker, but still keep a bit of a solid mid-tone to it. Then I'll use a 4B when I really want to go dark. There is darker than 4B. I think it's like up to 9B or a 10B, which is absolutely crazy. And then if I really need to go light, I have a 10H that I like to use um, when I don't want to have like a pure white surface, but want to add like a super, super light shadow. Because if I were to probably use my 10H under these circumstances, I don't even think my video would pick it up. Like I'd have to show you my sketch pad in person with anything that had a 10H on it because it's just so light. But it does do its job when I'm looking to have a little bit of value somewhere, but I don't want it to be too heavy. But those are like the four that I go with just for economic reasons. But I figure they are balanced enough. And it's not like I have to press hard on either one or any of those to really get the rendering that I desire. When it comes to rendering, you'll see a little bit. If I know something's going to be in the majority of shadow or has some kind of shadow on it, I just like to throw down a a first layer lightly because I find it's easier to layer. You can always go a little bit harder, but it's really difficult to take away. So at least for the trunk for now, I think what I'll do is I'll do kind of a light layer of my HB on everything. Because what I'm going to do is I'll have my light source up here. So that means kind of this outer rim area, you're going to see light, maybe a little bit on kind of the outer edges here, but then definitely towards the areas that are facing away from my light source. And anything under the tree is not going to get as much light to nothing. So it'll be really dark underneath there. But this is what I typically like to do first. I'll just kind of throw on a light layer of value, and then the spots that need to be darker, I'll go a little bit harder on the pencil, or use something like the 4B, which is really easy to get some value down if you really need some darkness to your drawing. So I'll go to the 4B just to kind of show you what I mean. So like we're gonna have a really dark tree trunk underneath here, and that's gonna add some contrast between my canopy, and my tree trunk, just for the sake of it. And studying light and shadow is a lifelong pursuit because it's not always obvious how a shadow is going to fall on a form of an object, but you can at least get the basics enough down to where even if, let's say, in reality, it's not exact, your average viewer is not going to question it because it looks good enough. And that's the cool thing about art is that not everything has to be exact. If it looks too perfect, then people are going to question it and think it looks fake. But they won't question something that's non-exact but looks realistic enough to where, you know, nothing truly stands out. All right, so for now, that's our trunk, and I'm gonna start adding another layer of my HB because I want there to be some kind of differentiation between my canopy and my tree trunk because you're gonna have like the brown here, and then you're gonna have kind of your light and dark greens here, so it makes sense to go with a lighter value but still have enough layered on to where you can have that value and show that it has some 3D aspects to it. And also, if you think about it too, so with the ellipse and then you have like this arc here to give it that 3D-ness, it also creates that guideline for plane to help you think about where you can place your shadows. So in general, like on this right side here, I have my ellipse in this little area here plus the arc. So this top section, this could be a plane where I'm going to have more light, and then this bottom section is where I'm going to have more shadow. So construction lines, at least in the very beginning until you become a master at whatever subject matter, uh, are super helpful. I'm always a proponent of people making their construction lines. Um, I know a lot of the masters they don't do as much construction lines, but they've done enough drawing to where they see it in their head. They don't have to worry about it. I'm not quite there yet in my journey, but that is okay. And if you're not quite there yet in your journey, that is okay. And you just gotta keep practicing no matter how long it takes. And if you get burned out on a topic, which I hope you never do, it's okay to walk away from it for a while. Go learn something new. There we go. That's fine. Then I'm gonna do a little bit of maybe a little bit more of some differentiation. Gonna give a little bit harder of an outline to my trunk, especially here, so y'all can see the difference. But yeah, that's the gist of it, of how to draw a tree. Now there are other ways that I was taught you could do. So like for this trunk here, let's say you have the trunk, we draw our ellipse. Not all trees will have this kind of formation for the roots. Um, so you can bring it out here, and then you can bring these lines down a little bit more, and you can make it have a little bit more 3D-ness to it, like that. And then have these lines go up. Because some trees, like their roots go kind of like in a star pattern. But that's just one way, if you ever want to do it that way. Um, I noticed some of like the 2D sprite trees, they like to do kind of like this star web design for their base. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Hopefully you learned a little something, and you also get to see what I'm doing, and hopefully what I said makes sense. And as time goes on, I do more of these videos, I'm going to be trying to find ways to improve it because I get it, first video, it's never going to be perfect. There might be something with the video quality, but hopefully enough here, like you can see clearly and understand what I'm doing. So I appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time.